Welcome to the 3030 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello everyone, my guest today is Alex Jamieson. Alex is the best-selling author of Women, Food, and Desire, co-creator and co-star of the Oscar-nominated documentary Super Size Me. Highly sought-after wellness expert Alexandra Jamieson has made it her mission to empower women to create epic lives by honoring their cravings and kicking body shame to the curb. Alex is the creator of Her Rules Radio, a #1 rated podcast on iTunes where listeners from around the world are educated and captivated by thought-provoking interviews on wellness, cravings, sexuality, and more. And remember, there is only 2 weeks left for PaleoFX. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, go to the website. You won't regret it. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hello, everyone. Super excited to have Alex Jamieson in my show. We're talking before we started recording about how Super Sized Me was my first introduction to the health world. Before watching that movie, and all the buzz about it, I really didn't think much about what I was eating. And somehow, through mutual friends, Dr. Christensen introduced me to Alex. And now I have her on my show. So this is I'm having a freak out moment right now. Alex, how are you?
I'm so well. It's great to meet you. It's great to be here.
So you've been super busy ever since, you have your own show, you have your own podcast, you're writing a book. But tell us, before we begin and start talking about all your projects, what's your hero story?
Oh, my own personal hero story?
Yeah.
Or okay. Well, actually, I was really lucky to be raised by a couple of very idealistic educators, hippies, basically. My parents were hippies. I was raised on an old organic farm outside of Portland, Oregon. And my father he was a high school principal for almost 30 years. And he always instilled in my brother and I this idea to do what you love and the money will follow. Just really go for what you're passionate about. Don't do something just because it'll make you money. You should really do something that fulfills your heart and soul. So it took me a long time to figure out what that was. In my mid-20s, I was bouncing around city to city, job to job, couldn't really figure it out. But I had strayed from the organic gardening upbringing that I had, and I was a serious junk food addict. So here I was, 25 years old, working a corporate desk job, and I had put on 30 pounds since college. I was exhausted, and I was having migraine headaches almost every day. And I went to a couple doctors, basically because the pain was so bad, terrible headaches and lots of Advil, just like handfuls of Advil every day. And I went to a doctor, and he basically gave me a prescription for painkillers and Prozac. And I have a family history of, abusing prescription drugs, and I did not want to go that route. So I went to another doctor who we would now call an alternative doctor, or, somebody that right?
Yeah.
And he sat down with me, and he asked what I'm eating. And I told him. And he said, "Oh, no wonder you're sick. Okay, so we need to look at your diet." So this was back in 2000. And I took all of his recommendations. I mean, almost when I saw the list of things I couldn't eat and the things I should eat, I was like, oh my God, this is going to change everything. But I'd really hit bottom. And I took his advice, and I went and I read everything I could on health and food at that time. I didn't do it perfectly. It was not easy at first, but I was so miserable. I was like, I'm going to do this, and I think it's going to work. And within a couple of weeks, the headaches were gone. The exhaustion was gone. I had energy. The depression did. That was the moment everything changed.
One of the people at my school, one of the elders at the school, he's a naturopathic doctor, and his cat was losing his hair, and he took him to the vet, and the vet was like, "Oh, your cat's stressed, so we're gonna give him some anti-stress medication. And he went back home, and he was like feeding the cat stress medication. And then a friend came in to visit him, and he was like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm giving my cat his medication." It's like, wait a minute, what? Your cat has stress? And then they started looking at like, oh yeah, I'm a naturopath, I know what to do. So they looked at the diet, and the cat was eating some crap diet. They changed the diet, and guess what? The cat stopped losing its hair. So all these different symptoms that we might think are not related to anything could be just like this tiny quotation marks change that you can make in your life that can have like such repercussions. You have been able to take this message and expand it, to reach millions of people.
I feel so lucky that you and I are in this time where we can self-publish, where we can put our ideas online, where we can have a podcast. Getting the message out there is easier now than ever.
So the problem is that as scientists, whenever something comes into your plate and you try it out and you do it on yourself and you see some results, and then something happens and these results, like, you think to yourself, there has to be something else. I haven't achieved complete health. And then you add something to your diet, and I think you know where I'm going with this. And then there's a lot of like backlash from people that are like, wait, you used to tell me not to do something, and something really funny happened to you with your health, huh? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I first changed my health in my mid 20s, I discovered all these books about veganism, and I had never heard of vegan before. So I became vegan in 2001, and absolutely changed my health. But I became the kind of vegan where I took out sugar, I took out processed foods. You can be a vegan now and live on bagels and Pepsi, but that's not the kind of vegan I was. And then I met my now ex-husband Morgan. We made Supersize Me, and I to write 3 books on vegan cooking and vegan health. And for the next 10 years, I was a vegan spokesperson. I was a vegan health coach. And then, life changes. And flash forward 11 years or so, I'm now in my mid 30s. I have a little boy. I'm now going through a really stressful divorce, and my body has changed. And the vegan diet that healed me was no longer sustaining me, and my hormones were a disaster. I was severely anemic, chronically anemic. I tried everything in the framework to heal. I went talked to specialists. I had written 3 books on this. I knew the things you're supposed to do, all the foods, all the sea vegetables, all the things. Nothing was working, and I realized I teach people to listen to their bodies and to respect that we are evolving creatures and that what we need changes over time. But I'm not allowing myself that same gift. So I secretly started eating animal
Oh
products.
man.
I know, I know. And physically, I felt so much better. My body needed it, and I could absorb the nutrients that way that I was missing. And it took several years to get back to a place of balance. Now I like to say the diet that heals you is not always the diet that will sustain you. So I went back and forth for over a year because emotionally I was still so wrapped up in this definition of vegan. And I knew that if I told the world that I was now eating animal products, that I could be subject to a lot of backlash. Well, I had no idea how bad it was going to be. And I finally kind of outed myself. I'm not vegan anymore. Still one of my most popular articles on my blog. And, the backlash online was huge. Thousands of comments, thousands of Facebook shares. I lost a lot of friends. A lot of vegan friends that I had don't speak to me anymore. And it made me realize that I'm never going to define how I eat ever again because it changes. And food is very personal, it's very tribal. So people feel sometimes feel offended by what you eat if it's very different from how they eat, because sometimes they will take it as a judgment against them personally. So it's very hard to change how we eat, especially around our family or friends, people we've known a long time, because they take it as a judgment against them when it has absolutely nothing to do with them.
That is so spot on, because like I visit my family, every once in a while. I get like the same message from my mom like a couple of weeks before I arrive, and it's like, okay, you're gonna come in and please, don't talk about the diet. We don't eat like you. We understand what you. And I'm like, Mom, I don't talk about my diet. It's just that the aura, I guess, that we present when we go to a family reunion and everyone is eating something and they ask, hey, do you want some cake? And I'm like, actually, no. And very respectful. There was a period of time, like around 6 months, where I was like just yelling at people to drop the wheat, but I quickly learned that is not the way to approach this, because it's so personal. Like, we're literally taking electrons off of amino acids to incorporate into our body whenever we put this sustenance into our mouths. And I can't imagine, I can't imagine if tomorrow I posted, hey, guess what, guys? I'm going to stop eating meat because I grew up in this space through the paleo community. I can't imagine what would happen. But we should be respected, or at least giving the leeway to experiment. And when we are wrong, we should be allowed to have, a change of heart, as long as it's not salutary. Sometimes as a personality, you're not allowed at that, and it's so fucking unfair.
It really does feel that way, doesn't it? I mean, people come to me. I'm a coach. I've coached thousands of women over the last 15 plus years, and they come to me, and at first they just say, "Tell me how to eat. Just tell me what to do." Here's People want to change, but they don't want to be changed, right? They do want to transform. They do want a better way. They want to reach their highest self, etc. But they truly, even though they say they might, they don't want somebody else coming in from the outside directing how you should do it, right? We think that we buy the diet books, we listen to the experts, but after a while, it starts to feel like a position. It starts to feel like someone's taking away my control, and it doesn't acknowledge or honor our own personal experience. So people want to change, but they don't want to be changed. And as experts, as you and I have experienced, and I was like that too, back in the beginning, I was like, everyone should be vegan. It was probably a year where I was like, do it, it'll solve every problem, which is not true. And a lot of people are like, screw you. Like, don't tell me how I should eat. If they're not coming to you for help, you should absolutely, just be the example. Just live your life for you, what works for you. And if people are curious, they will come ask, searching.
I started doing this crazy diet, where I'm like not eating processed foods and avoiding grains and stuff like that. And I start getting better. I start losing some weight. I start getting, a little bit healthier. I had a dog. I had an Italian Greyhound, Apple. Early into this process of changing from processed foods to like natural foods, Megan and me, my girlfriend, had a discussion about putting her that it was time. And she was like really sad and she was not like moving a lot. We felt bad for her, so we started feeding her like scraps from our food. And all of a sudden, she started to recover. And she gave me 5 more years of her life, And I remember the call from Megan's dad. I was like, okay, what book should I read? And I was like, so what was it? Was it like I'm losing weight and I'm PRing when I'm doing 5Ks? And he says, it was your damn dog. So it was like the example of like regaining health that actually convinced more people than me stepping on a soapbox and yelling at people.
Yeah, absolutely. People want to be inspired. They don't want to be judged.
And now, and a lot of your recent work has been inspiring women. You have a pretty popular podcast, based around women. What are some of the problems that are going on in the health space? For example, I think 85% of naturopaths that are graduating are females. And the people leading the naturopathic movement are guys. Why?
Well, it takes a long time to dismantle the patriarchy. That's the short answer. And that actually answers part of the health and dietary question writ large, which is, if diet and exercise are the answer, why are so many people still sick and struggling with their weight? If it was as simple as eat less calories and exercise more, we all would just be perfectly fit by now, right? Well, as you and I know, we're discovering that there's so much more to it. It's about the quality of the ingredients, the quantity of the calories. So that's relatively new information for a lot of people, and a lot of people are still eating shit quality food. But for women, there's the added challenge of we are still totally judged by how we look and how much we weigh. And it's so ingrained in us from our earliest memories that how you look and how much you weigh determines whether or not you're a good woman, whether you're a good girl. So that just makes it a really precarious situation. And when women have, let's talking to a woman in her 40s or 50s, and she's been dieting most of her life since her teens. She's tried a lot of diets that were all about calories in, calories out, which was actually faulty information, but she has absorbed the idea that she fucked up, that she's a failure. So she's now trying to overcome this whole self-worth myth that she's absorbed, that she is bad, that she is wrong, that she can't do it, when in fact the diets failed her. So that's one aspect. And then I'm going to throw something out that's totally going to blow your mind, but if it perks up your interest, if one of your listeners is like, "Oh my gosh, wait, what was that?" then I've got a follow up for you. So here's the deal. As women, we were also taught this additional message that sex is dangerous. If you want it too much or pursue it too much, you're bad. It's actually dangerous to us. We're afraid of being assaulted or raped. Many of us have been assaulted or raped, so our bodies feel like dangerous places to live. So if sex is dangerous, which is a human imperative, right? We are all built to procreate. We all have these urges, and we could argue whether that's good or bad, but we have it within us. Pleasure is a built-in imperative. If sex is dangerous, if your entire life experience around sex is that it's a scary thing, food becomes our. So a lot of women, their only outlet for physical pleasure is food because sex is so dangerous and so problematic. So that is a whole can of worms that most women have never pursued. And it's really one of the subjects of my book, On Food and Desire.
So, I never thought about it that way. As people get healthier, people get more fertile. And I see that as a currency of health, because evolutionarily, we're not going to be procreating if we're not healthy enough to sustain a child. Okay? So now, if you're scared, if this is a danger response to have this sexual desire as you're getting healthy, it's not like something that you wish in a next step of life. It's your entire being all day long. As you're getting healthier, maybe your libido goes up because your hormones are correct, and now you are ashamed and terrified of what's going on physiologically. So you reach for that chocolate bar, you reach for that Twinkie. I never thought about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting. In addition, like my mother's generation was worried about getting pregnant too young. Getting pregnant was the fear. And now I have a dozen girlfriends who are, in my age range, late 30s, early 40s, who their biggest fear is that they can't get pregnant. Like getting pregnant is now harder and harder for women because we are this generation, Gen X. They were taught again, like we were given this kind of superhero version of what womanhood now is, and to have it all meant having a huge career and then having kids, so there's like additional stresses on our bodies, which are causing hormonal issues. So, it's fascinating to me to look over history of the last few generations and just see how attitudes towards food, health, and womanhood have totally changed. And yet, there are some things that have not. We're still totally judged, and our value is based on our bodies.
So, how do we fix this problem? Do we have an honest conversation about sexuality, or do we have an honest conversation about food? Where do you start?
Oh, both. All of it. Let's just start with honest conversations. Being curious with people in your life and being curious and really honest with yourself. There's a whole chapter in my book, Women, Food, and Desire, about the body-mind connection. And, let's start with how honest are you about how you think about yourself? How honest are you about the thoughts that you have about your body? The big one. And how you can then use some positive psychology techniques to turn those negative thoughts around. We mostly think negatively about our bodies. We mostly try to beat the crap out of ourselves into a happy relationship with our bodies, but it's really not possible. So you have to bravely be honest in hearing that voice in your head. Some people call it the inner critic. I call it the bitch brain that's always laying in on you. So, get honest about that. Get some support around transforming and flipping those thoughts. Start looking for evidence that you are actually a worthy, great, amazing human being. And as you go through that process, I really encourage you to have that conversation with someone else in your life. I have an 11-year-old son who is I'm biased, but he's an amazing human being. And I noticed that, he has dyslexia. And I noticed that at the age of 6 or 7, he started to feel stupid. He would come home from school and he starts to notice that the other kids finish their writing assignment first and they get to go outside and play. And it's taking him a lot longer. So he starts to feel dumb. And, we started to get him help, extra tutoring to help with his different style of learning. But I also realized like he has very successful creative parents. He only sees the people in his life as being very successful, as if it came effortlessly to us. His mom has written 4 books. His dad has written a couple books and makes all these movies. Like, oh, I'm never going to do that because I can't learn to write, So we started talking with him about things that are hard for us. Even now when I sit down to write a blog, I'll say, at the end of the day, like, I really struggled with this. I only like wrote 1 paragraph. I sat down for 2 hours and it was so challenging, but I'm going to get back to it tomorrow. Like really like letting him see that the creative process is a struggle. Or with food, I had to take gluten out of my diet. There have been times when I go off sugar. There's just an evolution of how I eat. And instead of keeping it from him or judging myself for, I ate too much sugar last week. Now I have to go on a super strict restrictive diet. I'm like, okay, this is, I didn't feel so good when I had a glass of wine the other night. So I'm just not going to drink for a few weeks, just like being really honest about my own process. But how often do we have that relationship with the closest people in our lives?
Sometimes it's like with the people that we need to be more open with, that's where the people that we're more secluded and the people that we guard ourselves. And it could be, like I don't have a kid, but maybe the parent child, you don't want to give a bad example, but sometimes, it's important to see your dad struggle, your mom struggle. Now, you touched this, like briefly at the beginning of the conversation about like people picking your career for you or thinking that, oh, you're not going to make any money with that degree, I don't know if you've noticed, but the more and more adolescents that I meet or kids that I meet and I ask them, what do you want to do when you grow up? I could tell you from the age when I was 4, I was like, I want to be a doctor, like I knew it. But like, in a couple of years, I haven't had a straight response, okay? Any thoughts of why? And then secondly, what would you think, what would you say to the, there's a lot of thoughts about moving towards a more career or trade driven economy where like people shouldn't go to art school or shouldn't go, that they should do trades, or like the loans from college are going to cripple you. What would you say to the, because we need philosophers, we need artists, we need, what can you tell to the people listening about this being scared about the economy collapsing?
Well, the world is always on the verge of collapse. My
I
dad was
wonder
a
why
history
hasn't.
teacher. Yeah, I know. Well, because human beings are innately hopeful creatures, right? Life finds a way. At my own kid, I've already told him, like, I don't care if you go to college. I don't. But I do care that you pursue your passion. So if that means art school, if that means trade school, if that means a 4-year accounting degree, like, I don't care. I truly do not care what he chooses to do, but I do care that he fulfills his soul, fulfills his purpose in life. My own dad, who was a high school teacher and then a principal for so many years, he started a lot of apprenticeship programs in his high school because he said, look, not every kid is meant to go to a 4-year university. There has to be other options for them. Get them an apprenticeship, get them into a trade school, get them somewhere where they love doing it. There are kids who love to work with their hands. There are kids who love to make things. There's kids who are quiet, who want to be librarians, or the kids who are loud. I mean, it doesn't matter. There has to be a wide variety of options. And I think what's changing is the assumptions by parents that we force on our children about what they should be, what they should do. Again, I was very lucky. I had parents who were supportive of me trying a lot of different things out, and I found it. I found my thing. And it still evolves too. You may have experienced this as well. Like, I started off, I went to culinary school. That's my first entree into this whole world of health. I went to a specialized culinary program that was all about training people to be health supportive chefs. So I learned how to cook macrobiotic and gluten free, etc. And that was not a thing that people were doing back in 2000. Now it's become very popular. But at the time I was like, I don't know, Dad, like, will you co-sign on another student loan for me so that I can go to culinary school? Like, that was totally out of left field. I already had a bachelor's degree in history that I wasn't doing anything with. But to have that support, I've proven that I could pay my loans every month and I had that backing. So I feel incredibly grateful, but I think we need to shepherd our children so that they can find their best path.
Once you find your path, how do you connect with people? How did you get over the ceiling, the glass ceiling? How did you motivate yourself? And because that, it's easy for me because I'm a guy. How did you do it?
Well, it's been a long process, and I started my career by putting flyers in apartment buildings. That's what I was like, private chef for hire, $20 an hour, putting them up in apartment buildings. It got me my first 3 jobs. I was like, oh wow. And then I actually started reaching out to nonprofit organizations because I wanted to be working with people who were open to using food as a healing modality. So I ended up writing an email to the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp, which is the camps that Paul Newman founded. All of the Newman's own products, all the profits go to these camps where children around the world can go to camp for free. When they have life-threatening diseases, they can go to camp and still get their medical treatment and go be a kid and be safe. And I got to be the veggie chef at his camp here in Connecticut for a summer. Just because I reached out and said, what can I do? I love what you're doing. How can I support? And they hired me on the spot. So, the very beginning of my career was just reaching out to people, putting myself out there. So, and this was really, I sent an email, but this was mostly like pounding the pavement, getting out there, meeting people. And today I still go, I work from home. I'm very lucky, but I still go out to events. At least I try to go, 3 or 4 times a month to meet new people. I'm going to a big book event tomorrow night. A woman I know has a book coming out. I'm going to go meet people. I started working at a co-working space a couple times a week just so that I could be around other people, because that's what service is built on. It's built on being in relationship with other people.
Now with your podcast and with your book, what is your next mountain to climb? What is your biggest goal? What are you trying to fix or break?
Well, I believe that women, especially, but really all of us in this crazy food culture, that we need to start living life by our own rules. That the diet books and the rules we absorbed from our families of origin might not actually be what is best for us. How our parents ate and raised us to eat may not be what's actually going to serve us physically, emotionally, spiritually. So my podcast is called Her Rules Radio, where women go to learn how to live life by their own rules. And you can find that on iTunes. And then my book, Women, Food, and Desire, and it's a bestseller. It's been out for a few years, and I just got another email from a woman today saying, I found this. It's really helping me examine my relationship with food in a new way. And so I've still got a lot of work to do just on this topic. So I'm still promoting the book and the podcast.
How are you teaching your son how to eat and not affect his preconceptions of food? Because you talk about how our parents' diet is not going to be what's. So as a parent, as a mom, how do you make the best decision for your kiddo?
So it's a group effort. It's a co-created education. And I'm kind of lenient, like I'm not super strict. Like Friday nights is pizza and movie night, and we order in a pizza and we all watch a movie together. I was raised for most of my childhood was super strict, and I think it was actually too strict around food. Um, who can say? I turned out all right. But I have, I try to help my son just notice how food makes him feel, how different foods affect him, his mood, his energy. So I see that he's very sensitive to sugar. And so, there have been a couple times where we'll go out to brunch, go to a restaurant, or we'll visit a grandmother, and he'll have, big food buffet, and he'll get orange juice and waffles. I know what's coming. He's going to crash after he eats that. So when he crashes, in the first few years, between the ages of 4 and 8, I would just help him see, like, sweetie, I notice you're crying after you ate the orange juice and waffles. Like, I notice that you're really tired and you're upset. And after, kids can't learn when they're in a meltdown, so you got to come at it afterwards. But just reminding him, like, not blaming him, but I noticed that this is the third time that you've had orange juice and cereal or orange juice and pancakes, and you've felt really bad afterwards. So just notice, like, how do I feel when I eat these different foods? And, he still has ice cream, he still has orange juice, but it's much less. He doesn't always finish his dessert. Like, it's pretty common that he's learned how to self-regulate. It's not about me imposing on him. It's about me helping him learn, how do different foods help you feel? And it's something I try to do with women. It's very different for kids and adults, what I'm trying to do. For kids, I really just want to help him learn himself and have that awareness. For women, that is absolutely true. We adults need that education too. Like, oh, how do I feel when I eat this versus that? If you eat Doritos and a Pepsi, you're going to feel very different than if you have salmon and broccoli, right? You can just imagine how you're going to feel. Well, a lot of people don't necessarily think that way. They're like, oh, how is this food choice going to help me feel the rest of the day? Versus how does this food choice help me feel the rest of the day? That's a really valuable practice to get into. But there's one other aspect for women that I want to go back to, that whole, food is our safe sex thing. I absolutely encourage women, especially because we have such a different culture around pleasure and self-pleasure, that finding physical pleasure for yourself is such a healing pursuit. So I've written one of my most popular articles I ever wrote was the 10 reasons why you should include masturbation in your self-care practices. Because for women, I mean, for everyone, for men and for women, but I speak to women mostly, that when we masturbate, even if you climax, it is so balancing for your hormones. It is so stress relieving, and it helps us create a really kind, loving connection with our bodies. So it's an aspect of food and pleasure that doesn't get talked about a lot. And I talk about that in Women, Food, and Desire.
There's so much shame around masturbation. I don't even know why. Like I'm so disconnected from that, that part of society or cultural connection, that it really doesn't even compute why you would have so much shame, around that. Maybe it's religious. Maybe it's like, even like if you look at the internet, like in Reddit, there's a subreddit called NoFap, and it's about stopping masturbation, and it's
Right.
like super pseudoscientifically veiled. The claims that they make are like, oh, if you don't masturbate for 30 days, you're going to, your testosterone is going to triple, and it's like, it makes no sense. It is based, like, I think that one of the founders is like a very strict Christian dude that has created this veil of science and to try to convince people to not masturbate. Like, what the hell, dude? Like, what do you care?
When I met my husband, he was actually in a self-imposed period of celibacy. He's like, actually, I'm celibate right now. I just noticed that I wasn't making very good relationship decisions and I just needed to check myself. And I think for some people, stopping doing something can help you get clear on your relationship to it. So maybe people do need to take a break from masturbation for a little bit, like, oh, am I using this to avoid something? Or, oh, no, actually, it is an okay thing for me. There's no reason to think that stopping doing something is a terrible thing if it helps you get clear on your relationship to it. But I know this nofap community is so shame based,
Yeah.
and most sexual topics, whether it's sex education, which we need more better sex education in this, not just the basics of sex ed, but erotic education. Like, what's your relationship to pleasure? Most young women are never taught that sex should be nice for them too.
Hmm.
And most dudes are not taught, and they have this total misconception that it's all going to be like porn. It's all going to be like beautiful porn shots or something, which is not reality. So we all end up really dissatisfied. And there's a lot of young people out there, a lot of young women who are having sex and not getting anything out of it personally because they were never taught, hey, sex should actually be nice for you. It should feel good. So when you learn yourself through self pleasure, through masturbation, then you're more likely to tell your partner, hey, this is what I like, or no, I don't like that. I'd rather let's do this. That's really valuable. Great relationships start with that kind of honesty.
Before I continue with this, I somehow ended up changing this women empowerment and sexuality into talking about male masturbation and nofap. So there you go. I'm so ingrained in my head, and I was thinking about guys always. But
Oh, it's okay. Hey, we're both sharing our experience. It's all right.
with the Me Too movement, there was an amazing episode on This American Life a couple of weeks ago about this dude that was working for a news outlet, and he was like abusing women. The experiences of all these women he abused were almost like the same. Like, they were, to a certain extent, abused, and they thought that it was perfectly normal, and it was so insane to hear it from their mouths. The social pressures that were put on them, it kind of like assimilated that experience, and they normalized it. It was so weird. And that guy was a piece of shit, and he ended up being fired, and hopefully he'll get sued. But to hear all of these stories back to back to back to back to back about the same guy, and all of those experiences from these women were almost like identical. It's kind of scary.
I look at the whole movement and everything we're talking about in terms of the different experiences between men and women and food and masturbation, etc. This is all a direct effect of, what's called toxic patriarchy. the way that most power is in men's hands and has been for thousands of years, it's bad for all of us. It's bad for men too. It's bad for our boys too. The worst two words I think you can say to a young boy or any man is man up, right? That expression, man up or grow some balls. It's so toxic. It doesn't allow boys and young men to have any other emotional reaction than rage or anger. So men have been taught to suppress this whole range of beautiful emotions that would allow them to be who they are and to only be like aggressive and not good for anyone. So I think this whole situation is bad for all of us. And I really hope, like, yes, I think it's about time that women are being heard, that Me Too and Time's Up is getting a voice. Absolutely. There are people that need to be brought up on charges, and there's a lot of healing that needs to happen on both sides. The men who have abused women, they need healing too. So, my hope is that we can find a way to support each other through this whole process.
So, as a last topic, yeah, I could talk to you for 2 hours, but before it leaves my mind, let's talk a little bit about orthorexia, or the making yourself so worried about food or so worried about what you're eating that you actually harm yourself. So people know about bulimia, people know about anorexia. And then there's some orthorexic people out there that are so worried about what they're inputting into their bodies that they isolate themselves, or they make themselves sick, or they start losing weight, and they because they can't cope with the idea of putting something that is not good for them. So how do we balance this, self-love and this nourishment and this, with avoiding being orthorexic?
Yeah, so I started to experience orthorexia. I was so focused on eating right, in quotes, eating correctly, that I was ignoring these warning symptoms from my body. That's what orthorexia is. It's your strict dedication to a supposedly right way of eating in the face of evidence to the contrary. It's not actually good for you. It's not working. And I can tell you that there are many women, especially in the vegan community, who are masking disordered eating and calling it veganism. They're really restricting their calories. I mean, I know a couple of women personally who are definitely anorexic, but they're saying I'm vegan. And it's dangerous. But I also know a couple of paleo people who had to go plant based, for whatever reason. And that was just as problematic for them, So we are going to change. And I think that's what really I mean, there's so many nuances and there's so many individual stories when it comes to disordered eating. But if we could acknowledge, yeah, life is fleeting and I'm imperfect, you're imperfect. I'm going to change. My body is beautiful the way she is right now. Like every single person is a freaking walking miracle as far as I'm concerned. But we don't have space for that in the conversation about health and body. We have still, even in the alternative community, the pictures, the images that we present are a very narrow range of what's acceptable. And it makes it really hard for us to accept people who are, over a size 12, but still super healthy. Or, there's a range of healthy, but we're not allowed or we're not allowing that to exist. So I think we in the alternative health community actually have some work to do too.
Thank you so much for this super interesting interview. I love delving more into outside of like what supplements should I take, and what should my macros be, and we need to have more honest conversations about what's going on within the health community, because as perfect as those Instagram filters are, it's fucking messy. And there are so many people having so much trouble, and I'm so grateful to have you. So what are your handles? Where can people find you? You mentioned something about a book that is super popular, and you might have a gift for my listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can download the first two chapters of Women, Food, and Desire for free. You go to bit.ly/women free desire. So bit.ly/women free desire. get those first 2 chapters. And you can check out Her Rules Radio on iTunes, or just go to herrulesradio.com.
Thank you so much, and and I hope in the future we continue collaborating. We have a bunch of mutual friends that are super awesome. Thank you so much, Alex, and I'll see you soon.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.